Too much.
On World News tonight, trying to get out of the line of fire. The leading edge of Hurricane Ivan is a nasty suggestion of what's to come. In the presidential campaign today, John Kerry says President Bush is wrong on the economy. Tonight, we report from the battleground state of Pennsylvania. Martha Stewart says she wants to go to prison now, serving time now to protect the brand. And what will their future be like now? The survivors from school number 1 in Bestland, back in class today.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. We begin tonight with Hurricane Ivan. It has been in the news for days with all kinds of speculation about its potential. 2 million people along the Gulf Coast in Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana have all been told to get out of the way. In many places, the highways have traffic going only one way. Tonight, the storm is about 125 miles offshore. If it keeps moving as it is, landfall will be somewhere between Apalachicola in Florida, that means land of the happy people, and Grand Isle, Louisiana. ABC's Bob Woodruff is in Pensacola, Florida tonight. And Bob, I see that you are beginning to get a real taste of it.
We certainly are, Peter. You know, sometimes in these final hours before landfall, it's difficult to tell exactly where the eye of a hurricane is going to hit the ground, because sometimes they make a jog one way or the other at the last moment. But certainly the front edge of Ivan has hit here in Pensacola, and I got to say, in the last few minutes or so, this has really stepped up the ferocity of all this. And the worst of it, Peter, is still yet to come tonight.
The wind and the waves are pounding the Gulf Coast tonight. Although Ivan has been approaching for days, many waited until now to get ready.
We were really waiting to see what this thing was going to do, and now we know what it's going to do, so we got to get everything out of here.
It's going to totally destroy everything in here, especially if we get a surge like they're talking about.
There were still long lines in Alabama today for supplies and dry ice. And as far west as Houston, massive traffic jams as millions of people were urged to evacuate from what could be the most dangerous hurricane in a decade.
A Category 4 hurricane produces extreme damage potential. Along with the high surface carrying now, we could have extreme damage along the coast and well inland with major flooding.
People are taking the storm so seriously, almost all the residents on Pensacola's Barrier Island moved out.
Mandatory evacuation of the alley. You need to finish up your business as quickly as you can.
When they closed the bridge, authorities say only one couple chose to stay.
Been to a few. It's going to be a pretty good one.
As wind gusts grew, some residents watched in awe.
This is when you enjoy it right now. It's not that dangerous yet.
Others headed for the shelters with whatever possessions they could carry. Teresa Ruth is due to give birth in 6 days.
Where am I going to have this baby? Is the pressure going to drop and make me go into labor?
I think I might like earthquakes better, but I don't know yet. I'll let you know tomorrow.
By mid-afternoon, the wind was really whipping. Waves washed through Pensacola's marinas. Veterans of previous hurricanes here say this is the most ominous they've ever seen.
You think this dock's going to make it?
No, sir.
No way?
I don't think there's any way.
The eye of the hurricane is expected to hit land in a matter of hours, with winds of 135 miles an hour. Bob Woodruff, ABC News, Pensacola.
In New Orleans, it's been 40 years since a really powerful hurricane happened into the city. Half the city was underwater and 60,000 people were left homeless. Today, the potential for disaster is well remembered. And ABC's Jeffrey Kaufman is in New Orleans tonight.
As Hurricane Ivan approached, whipping up the wind and the water, New Orleans scrambled to fortify itself against the flooding that is almost certain to come.
It is a very real threat because, and you have to evacuate really if you want to save yourself.
And hundreds of thousands of people have evacuated. Today, the rollicking streets of New Orleans are quiet. Some who could not leave have taken refuge in the Superdome. Others have been told to shelter in tall buildings.
New Orleans is so vulnerable because it is the only city on the Gulf Coast that sits below sea level. Its only protection, these levees designed to hold the water back.
And the city is surrounded by water, with Lake Pontchartrain on the north and the Mississippi snaking through its center. A hurricane's unrelenting rain and surging seas could easily breach the levee system, leaving the city submerged. Scientists have tried to predict what a hurricane will do.
One of the local nicknames is the Cajun Atlantis, and this, I'm not trying to be flippant, but this may actually be, you know, within New Orleans' future.
Many people remember the 1960s when Hurricanes Betsy and Camille pummeled this coast, leaving scores dead and this water-soaked city reeling. Ruth Petrie has memories of a harrowing evacuation by boat during Hurricane Betsy. If Ivan does get bad, she and her husband will head for the attic.
He keeps a rope and he keeps life jackets.
In the attic?
In the attic.
That's kind of your escape route.
If in case you had to get out through your roof.
The worst of Hurricane Ivan may hit east of here, but this city is bracing to be hit hard. Jeffrey Kaufman, ABC News, New Orleans.
Later this evening, Nightline will have the latest on the hurricane, and you can follow it all the time at abcnews.com. In the presidential race today, Senator Kerry delivered what his aides touted as a major address on the economy. Democrats view the president's handling of the economy as one of his biggest weaknesses. Senator Kerry's speech in Detroit was significant for what he said and also the way he said it. Here's ABC's Dean Reynolds.
Kerry is holding a slim lead in the Michigan polls, and the state has lost more than 200,000 jobs since this president took office, making it a perfect setting to blast Mr. Bush.
This president has created more excuses than jobs. His is the excuse presidency.
In Detroit, Kerry tore into the Bush economic record, which he said included 1.6 million jobs lost in the last 4 years, 4 million people slipping into poverty, 45 million currently without health insurance, and trillions of dollars in debt. Kerry would repeal tax cuts for those making over $200,000 and give some measure of tax relief to almost everyone else. His plan also calls for lower health care costs and a reduced deficit. The Bush campaign dismissed him as a pessimist, but Kerry's decision to use sharper language was a strategic change. He was more confrontational on Iraq as well, telling radio host Don Imus he's taking the gloves off.
What you ought to be doing and what everybody in America ought to be doing today is not asking me. They ought to be asking the president, what is your plan? What's your plan, Mr. President, to stop these kids from being killed?
Later in the day, Kerry came here to Wisconsin, where he is trailing Mr. Bush and where his audience sounded as though they appreciated the tougher, more direct line of attack, especially when he told them Bush's decision to go to war was disastrous.
It was not listening to the advice that he was given. It was arrogant, turning your back on the decisions that were available to you, and we're paying the price.
With 48 days to the election, Kerry just may be shifting into a new gear. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, with the Kerry campaign in Madison.
In Washington today, there was some depressing news for Iraqis. A State Department official said there that the United States cannot guarantee that Iraqis will have essential services in the next 3 years, including clean water. That's because the Bush administration wants to shift the bulk of billions of dollars earmarked for reconstruction to military operations. And in Iraq today, we learned that another 2 Marines have been killed in separate incidents west of Baghdad. In Vienna today, the United Nations Nuclear Agency was considering how to deal with Iran's refusal to open its nuclear program to inspection. The United States wants a UN resolution demanding that Iran provide full access to inspectors. ABC News has learned that Iran may be taking steps towards developing a nuclear device at a site near Tehran, the capital. Here's John Carl with an ABC News exclusive.
There is concern inside the U.S. and European intelligence communities these satellite pictures of an Iranian military site may be new evidence Iran is trying to build a nuclear device.
It's the first case where we're looking at a set of facilities that could be used in making the nuclear weapon itself.
Nuclear analyst David Albright looked at the images obtained exclusively by ABC News.
What increases suspicions is if you go down this road, you come to what looks to be like a bunker, partially buried, where you could conduct a test of a fairly large amount of high explosives.
That kind of testing is a critical step in building a nuclear weapon. The International Atomic Energy Agency is concerned about what Iran is doing.
A recent report by the Atomic Agency didn't mention this location, but ABC News has learned the IAEA has asked Iran to visit this facility. U.S. and UN sources say Iran has ignored that request.
Iran insists its nuclear program is designed only to generate energy, but analysts say the Iranians are doing everything they would need to do to make nuclear weapons as well.
In Iran, international inspectors have been able to map out a comprehensive, large-scale industrial program designed to produce nuclear materials that can be used in either a peaceful program or in a weapons program.
While there is growing consensus in Europe and the U.S. that Iran is trying to develop nuclear weapons, there is virtually no agreement on what to do about it. Jonathan Karl, ABC News, the State Department.
One other note from overseas today, the oil-producing cartel known as OPEC said today it will increase production from 26 to 27 million barrels a day. Analysts say it will probably have little effect on oil prices because they are already, OPEC that is, pumping more than that. One OPEC minister did call it a gesture of goodwill. When we come back this evening, Martha Stewart says she wants to start her prison sentence now. We'll take a closer look at one of the states that will decide the presidential election. And at the end of the broadcast tonight, back to school. After the terrorist attacks, the children of Beslan.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by Bayer Aspirin.